Hey boys and girls, we're ready to begin our clay unit. I want to show you some supplies that we're going to be using to begin with. Everybody is going to be working on a canvas clay mat, and that's so that our clay does not stick to the table surface. Most often you will be using the clay on the mat. You are allowed to use it on the table for certain things like coil building, but overall have the mat in front of you and be working on it. Another thing you'll find in your clay bins are dowel rods, and we use these to roll out clay if we need to. I have some scissors that are set apart for clay use. The bins have combs in them for texture making. They also have plastic knives for cutting and for scoring clay. Same thing with this plastic tool you could use to score clay with. These tools are really cool. They're called wire tools, and these are used to carve into clay as well. When you carve into clay and you remove clay from a piece of sculpture, or anything from a piece of sculpture, when you remove it or take it away, it's called the subtractive process. If you add clay to sculpture using something like the slip and score method, it's called the additive clay process, or additive sculpture process. Some of the bins also have some sharp tools in it for making holes and for scoring as well. When you first get your clay, you're going to notice that it's damp and soft. Clay is made up of water and rock. It's found in the earth. Clay, when it hardens, can be made soft again by adding moisture to it if it's not too dried out. When we begin working with our clay, the first thing we want to do is just add a tiny bit of moisture to it, and on our clay mat we are going to knead and wedge our clay. And it's kind of like you would use if you were you would knead or wedge dough if you were making cutout cookies or pizzas. But the idea of kneading and wedging your clay mashes is so that you mash all the clay together and you get out air bubbles that are trapped in the clay. And for a piece of clay, typically you'd want to knead or wedge for a couple minutes. Unless it's straight out of the clay box, it's probably not as necessary. A few times would probably be enough. When we knead and wedge the clay, we're working out air bubbles from within the clay. So basically, if we have an air bubble in a piece of clay, let's say the air bubble is this big, and it's trapped in the clay, and then we stick it in the kiln, which is the big oven that we cook the clay in. When we cook clay, it's called firing. That air bubble is going to expand because air expands when it's heated. So it's going to get bigger and bigger, and eventually it's probably going to get big enough that it pops, that it breaks the clay apart. And what's really nerve-wracking is sometimes if your project is the one with the trapped air, and that air bubble expands and pops your clay and breaks it and kind of explodes your clay, all the pieces from your clay could hurt and impact the pieces around them, so other people's artwork that is sitting near your piece of clay. So it's your job to make sure you knead and wedge and you get all your air bubbles. You can never have trapped air in clay. After you knead and wedge, you're ready to begin building with your clay. Just to explain a little bit about the clay process, we build in wet clay. Then we have to let our clay dry out for about a week, and then we fire it or cook it in a kiln. I'm going to take you over and show you the kiln in a moment. The kiln is located in Mrs. Oliver's room, and the kiln fires or cooks clay at temperatures well beyond 2,000 degrees. We cook our clay at around 1,400 to 1,500 degrees. So anyways, let's walk over for a minute and check out the kiln so you can see what it looks like. Boys and girls, here's our kiln that we fire our clay in. It opens up and the clay is loaded inside. We turn it on and we set it to heat up to about 1,400 to 1,600 degrees, and it takes about 10 hours for it to heat up and cool all the way down. Lastly, boys and girls, what I wanted to tell you about was the glazing process, and I just wanted to point out that when we glaze our clay, after it's fired or cooked in the kiln, it becomes what's called bisqueware, and bisqueware can be painted with a glaze. The glaze is painted on, and when you paint it on, it looks very different in color than it actually turns out when you fire it. So here's an example of a purple bottle. It's called Wisteria Purple, and here actually is the color that it fires to, and it fires real shiny like glass. But if you look at the bottle itself, the bottle looks like a dull, almost brown color. So there's a big difference between the two, what it fires to and how it goes on. that's kind of one of the cool mysteries of clay. It makes it really, or of glazing, and it makes it really fun to work with. After you paint the glaze on, I actually have to put it back into the kiln and fire it again at even hotter temperatures than I did the first time. And that melts the glaze and it becomes like a shiny gloss finish that's just super pretty. And it's fun to see the results.